Imagine for a moment, what if the words we use, especially the really powerful ones like freedom, aren't just simple labels? What if they're actually, carefully constructed tools? Tools designed to shape our very thoughts, our policies, even the direction of a nation. Today, we're taking a deep exploration into exactly that idea through a fascinating analysis of a book by cognitive linguist George Lakoff. It's titled Whose Freedom? The Battle Over America's Most Important Idea. And this book, it offers a really profound look at how the meaning of freedom became so intensely contested in American politics, particularly during the Bush administration after 9/11. And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-voice AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM, which allows us to get into deeper, more dynamic book analysis. Now, Lakoff is really uniquely positioned to dissect this kind of political language. He's a renowned cognitive linguist from UC Berkeley, known for his deep insights into how our minds use conceptual metaphors, and how those metaphors, often unconsciously, influence our thinking. His academic background, well, it gives him incredible insight when it comes to critiquing political rhetoric.
That's absolutely right. And this book, it did just appear out of nowhere. It was written at a very specific time, the Bush administration, right after 9/11. That was when freedom became, well, almost a central pillar of American policy. It was the word used to justify military actions abroad, to enact pretty sweeping changes in social policy back home. Lakoff saw this happening, this intensifying struggle over what the term even meant, and he decided to step into the fray.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How does language, something we often just take for granted, become such a fierce battleground for a concept so fundamental?
So let's start right there. What was Lakoff's core mission with Whose Freedom? Who was he actually hoping to reach? And, what was the big idea he wanted to get across?
Well, Lakoff's main audience was pretty clear. Progressives, policy thinkers, and just citizens who were deeply concerned about how political language was evolving. His goal was really to pull back the curtain for left-leaning readers, to make them acutely aware of the, let's say, sophisticated rhetorical strategies conservatives were using.
Oh.
But it wasn't just about awareness. It was kind of a rallying cry, too. He wanted to give progressives the tools, the understanding, to reclaim the discourse around freedom. He explicitly set out to show how conservatives had, well, in his view, sort of appropriated and reshaped the meaning of freedom for their own advantage. And he was urging progressives to respond more strategically with their own clear values front and center.
Okay, so he wanted to expose that shift. What did he actually find when he started digging into how freedom was being used? Were there, fundamentally different versions of it floating around? This is where it gets really interesting for how we understand political arguments, I think.
Oh, absolutely. He found two fundamentally different versions, almost like opposing forces, really pulling the word in different directions. Lakoff points to these two core competing ideas of freedom embedded deep in American political culture. So on one side, he identifies what he calls the conservative frame. This is often characterized by a hierarchical individualistic narrative. He often aligns it with a strict father metaphor for government. Think of government as a stern, disciplining parent figure. And in this view, freedom heavily emphasizes what philosophers call negative freedom. That is, freedom from interference.
Right. Freedom from government, from external constraints.
Exactly. Freedom from being told what to do. It's the idea of being left alone to pursue your own individual goals, to choose your own path. Then, on the other hand, Lakoff traces the progressive frame to what he calls a nurturant parent tradition.
Okay, so a different family metaphor entirely.
Right. Here, government is seen more like a supportive, protective parent. And this vision, it pushes for a more collective, emancipatory understanding of freedom. The focus shifts to positive freedom. So freedom through community, through opportunity, through the public structures and support systems that actually enable people to flourish.
So not just being left alone, but having the actual ability or resources to act freely.
Precisely. It's the idea that true freedom often requires certain conditions, certain opportunities to actually be provided, often by the community or government. And what's really fascinating here is how these deep underlying worldviews, these mental models we all have, how they manifest themselves directly in policy debates. They shape everything, from arguments about economic regulation to debates about social safety nets. It's quite profound.
That is a powerful distinction. So, okay, knowing these two visions are clashing, how does Lakoff then show us how these linguistic battles unfold? What are the key rhetorical strategies or linguistic tools he points to? How do people push one frame over the other?
He uses a really sophisticated lens, obviously drawing on his background in cognitive linguistics, to break down the strategies. He looks at the classic rhetorical appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. So for Lakoff, ethos, that's the appeal to credibility, comes from the authority of the speaker. In politics, this means politicians trying to establish trust. Lakoff's own ethos, for example, comes from his scholarly background, right? And the rigorous sort of academic way he presents his arguments, referencing established works in his field.
Okay, makes sense. Credibility. What about pathos?
Then there's pathos, the appeal to emotion. Lakoff shows how politicians, and really anyone arguing about this, tap into the immense emotional power of freedom. They do this by weaving in personal stories, national narratives, historical accounts. They might invoke powerful cultural symbols, maybe figures like the Founding Fathers, to stir up a sense of urgency or patriotism or even nostalgia. Just think about how deeply resonant freedom is when you're talking about war or civil liberties or individual rights. It's designed to hit you right in the feelings, you know?
Yeah, it's a very loaded term emotionally.
Definitely. And finally, there's logos, the appeal to logic. Lakoff shows how arguments are structured, using clear definitions, sharp contrasts, and he meticulously traces these rhetorical strategies. He uses contemporary examples, integrates cognitive science to show how things like framing and just sheer repetition can subtly alter public perception over time. He really delves into metaphorical thought, this core idea that our understanding of abstract concepts like freedom is often based on concrete metaphors, and how language literally structures our reality. He particularly dissects the concepts of negative versus positive freedom to expose what he argues are logical inconsistencies in, particularly the conservative rhetoric, showing how one definition can be made to sound more logical or natural than the other.
Wow. That's a masterclass in how language is used, not just, what the words mean on the surface. It sounds like he's showing us it's not just what's said, but how it's said and what underlying beliefs that language is built on. That's crucial.
Exactly. And beyond those basic appeals, he points to several key strategies that are constantly at play. Framing and metaphor are absolutely central to his analysis. He famously introduces those government as family metaphors we touched on, the strict father for conservatives, emphasizing discipline, self-reliance,
Right.
versus the nurturant parent for progressives, highlighting care, empathy, community. And he powerfully demonstrates how these deep, often unconscious metaphors, they fundamentally shape policy, our sense of morality, public debate itself. They influence how we think about, everything from taxes to healthcare, often without us even realizing it's happening.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. He also focuses intently on diction and specific word choice. He looks at repetition, subtle shifts in meaning, loaded terms. A prime example he often uses is the phrase tax relief. It sounds neutral maybe, but it's not.
How so?
Well, it subtly implies that taxes are inherently a burden, a pain, an affliction, and that reducing them is therefore a relief, like being rescued from suffering.
Ah, I see. It frames taxes negatively right from the start.
Precisely. He consistently emphasizes the plasticity and contestability of language, the idea that words aren't fixed in stone. Their meanings can be stretched, fought over, strategically redefined, and this happens especially with terms that carry high emotional and moral weight, like freedom.
Uh-huh.
And throughout the book, Lakoff relies heavily on contrast and juxtaposition. He's constantly setting the progressive versus conservative frames side by side, illustrating their starkly different underlying worldviews. He'll juxtapose actual speeches, policy justifications, media snippets to really highlight these divergences in rhetoric. Importantly, he also appeals to shared values and national identity. He frequently invokes the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, core American ideals, and he argues that expanding freedom, in its positive collective sense, has actually historically been a progressive project. He directly challenges conservative claims to be the sole inheritors of that American tradition.
Wow, this analysis really does peel back the layers of public discourse, doesn't it? It makes you realize how deeply and sometimes subtly language shapes our world, our policies, even how we understand these fundamental ideas. It really highlights the immense power of critical thinking and how vital it is to understand the underlying structures of political talk.
Absolutely. And this exploration into whose freedom is exactly the kind of analysis we aim for. If you're finding this interesting and you're looking for more of this kind of insightful AI-powered book analysis that really inspires reflection and, rational thought by breaking down complex ideas, you can find more on Mindful Moments, which is our YouTube channel.
Good to know. So, okay, given all this powerful analysis, how effective was Lakoff in actually achieving what he set out to do with this book? Did he succeed? And were there any criticisms of his approach?
Well, I think he was largely very effective, especially for his target audience. He definitely succeeded in exposing how conservative rhetoric had, in his view, fundamentally shifted the public meaning of freedom. He provided really concrete examples and, importantly, offered practical advice for developing counter-rhetoric. He essentially handed progressives a kind of toolkit, you know, to develop more compelling, values-based language, moving beyond just reciting policy details to articulating deeper moral visions. In many ways, the book served as both a wake-up call and a toolkit for progressives wanting to reclaim the language of freedom.
So a practical guide as well as an analysis.
Yes. However, some critics did point out that while it was highly effective for its intended audience, those already leaning progressives, it perhaps sometimes preached to the choir. Meaning, it might not have successfully bridged the gap to skeptical or conservative audiences. It wasn't necessarily designed to persuade opponents.
Okay, fair enough. What about the logic of his arguments? Do people challenge that?
Generally, his arguments are seen as coherent and well-grounded in his linguistic research and the examples he provides. But a common critique, perhaps, was that Lakoff occasionally streamlined or maybe simplified the very complex historical evolution of freedom to better fit his central thesis. History is messy, right? And sometimes fitting it neatly into two frames can lose some nuance.
Sure, that makes sense.
But it's really worth noting, Lakoff is always completely transparent about his own progressive perspective. He's not hiding it. And he consistently cautions against manipulative language from any side, underscoring the dangers of allowing just one worldview to completely monopolize such a powerful and fundamental idea like freedom.
That's an important point about transparency. So, stepping back from the immediate political context then, what are some of the deeper, maybe more sophisticated insights Lakoff offers us about how we understand arguments, narratives, maybe even our own perceptions?
Yeah, I think one of his most profound insights is what you could call a metalinguistic critique. That sounds academic, but basically, he brings our attention to how arguments, even among highly educated people, often rely less on objective facts than on the underlying frames being used.
So the frame matters more than the facts sometimes.
In terms of persuasion and acceptance, often yes. This observation really challenges the simple, maybe naive belief that arguments are always won by objective facts alone. It pushes us to look beyond just the surface-level statements to the deeper cognitive structures, the metaphors, the frames.
That's unsettling, but probably true.
It is. He also touches on something like cultural sensitivity. He acknowledges how people's diverse backgrounds, their life experiences, their existing folk theories, their ingrained common sense ways of understanding the world, profoundly shape how they respond to rhetoric about freedom. Understanding this is really crucial, I think, for anyone trying to foster more effective and inclusive narratives, trying to communicate complex ideas across different groups. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, the book's later sections offer quite strategic advice. Advice for creating narratives that mobilize empathy, that foster a sense of community, that champion collective values. He really advocates for leveraging that nurturant parent metaphor to, in a sense, redefine American freedom for a new era. It drives home the point that the battle for ideas is often, at its deepest level, a battle over language itself.
This exploration into whose freedom really underscores that words just aren't neutral things. They carry immense power. Power to shape our reality, our policies, even our understanding of ourselves. It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, to always try and be aware of the underlying frames being used, whether you agree with them or not.
Absolutely. And this raises an important question for you, the listener. How often do you really stop and dissect the language being used in public discussions, especially around concepts you hold dear, like freedom or justice or equality? As we've talked about today, just understanding these underlying frames can unlock a whole new level of critical thinking. And for more insights like this, discussions that unpack complex ideas and really encourage this kind of thought, you can explore Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel and also listen to our podcasts wherever you get your audio.
Just consider for a moment how the very definition of a single word might dictate the course of a nation. It's a heavy thought. And what other seemingly simple concepts beyond freedom might be undergoing similar battles for their meaning right now, shaping our world in ways we haven't even fully recognized yet. If you found this exploration valuable, please remember to subscribe, share this deep dive with someone you know who loves intellectual challenges, and you can find a link to purchase the book Whose Freedom in our show notes. Most importantly, keep thinking critically about the world around you.